Day.
And while Phil was updating us on Puerto Rico, I just want to let you know that the Puerto Rican government has confirmed they are going to make a $600 million, it's actually $640 million GO bond payment on July 1st, but they still owe by the end of July $870 million. So two major threats, which poses the greater risk to the United States. Here now, Peter Schiff, the CEO of Euro Pacific Capital and the owner of an apartment, as I understand it, in Puerto Rico. You actually have your company's major headquartered offices are in Puerto Rico. You comfortable being there with all this debt hanging over you?
Well, I didn't buy any of the debt. I'm not that dumb. I bought some real estate, which has actually gone up in value. But I have an office there, too. It's my asset management company, which moved to San Juan about a year and a half ago from Newport Beach, California, where I had a 50% effective tax rate, and now I have a 4% effective tax rate. So I think that was a smart move, but I didn't buy any bonds, nor did I recommend that any of my clients buy Puerto Rican bonds.
Well, let's talk about those bonds. There are millions of people in the United States who don't even know that their retirement investments or the mutual funds that they're invested in actually hold Puerto Rican debt. Puerto Rico is going to make the GO bond payment, but they run out of money mid-July. They cannot continue to make their payments. They made that very clear. So are we facing default? And if the answer is obviously yes, what happens to the millions of retirees who don't even know they're exposed?
Yeah, we're certainly facing default. I've been advocating default for Puerto Rico because I think they borrowed too much money. Unfortunately, because of the low interest rates, we entice their politicians. Everybody wanted Puerto Rican bonds. All those muni bond managers wanted that triple tax-free debt because it was tax-free everywhere. And so they borrowed a lot of money, made a lot of promises to get elected, and now the bills are coming due and they can't pay. And I don't think they should be struggling. I think they should default.
So, Peter, I mean, the U.S. exposure to Greece is essentially nil. U.S. exposure to Puerto Rico is much greater. So is it obviously the greater threat? And if so, specifically how?
Well, sure. I actually think we benefited from the Greece problems because it caused some capital flight into the United States. But Puerto Rico is going to mean losses for Americans who are holding Puerto Rican debt. But I think it also could mean a re-rating of all municipal debt as creditors start to become a little bit more risk adverse and start to price in a default, not just in Puerto Rico, but in maybe other municipalities.
Chicago.
The reality is, though, yes, and many other cities. But the reality is that Puerto Rico is in better fiscal shape than the United States. They have a lower debt to GDP than we do. The only difference is investors aren't worried yet because the Fed is monetizing all of our debt. If we had a QE program for Puerto Rico, they wouldn't have a problem either. They can keep on borrowing money.
What you've just said, so that we can all understand, is that Puerto Rico poses a greater threat to the United States because it's going to drive up the cost of cities like Chicago, New York, Portland, Maine. Anybody who issues bonds to raise money, the cost of doing that is going to go up because of what's going to happen when Puerto Rico defaults.
Sure, and also Americans lose money. Most Americans don't own any Greek government bonds, but they probably own some Puerto Rican government bonds, whether they know it or not. They're in their muni bond portfolio. But this is just a look into America's future. And also, for all those people out there that think a $15 an hour minimum wage is a good thing, in Puerto Rico, the effective minimum wage is $15 an hour when you take into account their lower income, and they've got 20% unemployment. The labor force participation rate in Puerto Rico is only 42% because of the minimum wage. You've destroyed employment in Puerto Rico with a high minimum wage. So the same thing would happen on the mainland if we're dumb enough to raise minimum wage to $15 here.
Peter Schiff, we're going to give you the final word. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Wow. Great point from Peter.